Incorporated in Jacksonville, Florida, after a 38-year media research career. He is currently an archivist for the soon-to-be started Theodore Corbitt Institute for Running History Research and is the historian for the National Black Marathoners Association. In 2019, he was inducted into the National Black Distance Running Hall of Fame for his work in preserving long-distance running history. Gary Corbitt's broadcast research career started in New York City at the ABC television network, where he was a senior research analyst. He is a 1973 graduate of Howard University with a Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration. So it is with great pleasure that we have Gary Corbitt here to speak about his father's legacy and also to speak about the incredible long history that PPTC has in New York City running. And Gary, I hand it off to you now.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak about Harry Murphy. He was there at the start, and these gentlemen that started the club have far too often been forgotten and overlooked. And I've done a lot to change that. And this meeting today is an example of that, and I welcome the spreading of this presentation to others. Guess I got it. I hit OK with the meetings being recorded. Yeah, I guess I should. Okay. All right. Okay. I was trying to move the slide over. Okay, I got it now. I'm going to talk about my father first a little bit. I shouldn't assume that you know everything about him. Some things, but the health and rehabilitation side as a physical therapist, he's equally revered in the physical therapy field, and sometimes I come away saying he's 50-50 in terms of just his impact, and I give some more time and lean to the running side because of his work in course measurement, his groundbreaking work there to get systems established across the country. But he was a pioneer in the field of physical therapy also. He's often, I like the term founding father. Sometimes he's called the father of long distance running. I tend to give that to Browning Ross, who started the Road Runners Club of America, but he was the first president of New York Road Runners, third president of the Road Runners Club of America. Between 1969 and 1981, he had run more marathons than anyone else in the history of the sport, and he competed for the historic New York Pioneer Club. And safe to say, he helped invent the sport with a group of other people. And these gentlemen here are part of this. Photo was shared to me recently by, I think, Regina and Lillian, and I might have it also, but it's good timing. And Joe Kleineman, my father, Harry, and Kurt Steiner. I looked up just, both Kurt and Harry passed less than a month apart, and I knew it was close in 1993, but I confirmed that today, and that's Joe Burns to the right in the background. But as I said earlier, a lot of these pioneers, and there are others. There were 6 presidents before Fred LeBeau, and too often my father was acknowledged, but the gap between the other presidents, these people were just pretty much ignored over the years. And that's just changed now. But they all were so impactful, and Howell Scandura. I've wanted to do this meeting for a while to share some of these stories. Melrose Athletic Association is another group that I want to do a presentation for, and the Van Cortlandt Park Track Club. These are all clubs in the New York area that I've wanted to. But my father called these and others the wheels of the organization. To extend the list, Will Sanchez did this for me as part of the Running for Civil Rights exhibit that was New York Historical Society, and this is not it's not everybody who were history makers. Noah Sanders is not in this. Art Hall is not in this picture. Note Chris McKenzie, Catherine Switzer, Nina Kusick, Ann Cyrilnik, in terms of the women pioneers of the sport, because there was activity. We'll talk a little bit about that a little later. But there's so many aspects of the sport were invented in New York by this group that was leading Road Runners Club New York Association. You know, by 1961, I knew everybody in the club because I would pass out the newsletters, and the membership was, at that time was still less than 100. And even by 1970, it was not a big club at all compared to how the sport took off over the years. But Harry was there at the beginning. He was the first secretary-treasurer. He was vice president and secretary-treasurer again. I'm going to read you just some words from my father. Harry was one of the first of 6 or 7 local road runners to join the New York Road Runners Club in 1958. He did a lot of volunteer work for New York Road Runners. I interviewed my father, and I got over 20 hours. I still need to go over it, but I remember one response. There was a meeting in 1959 at Coons Dam Park where the club was deciding whether to continue or disband. There was issues with the AAU at the time to get race sanctions, and there was a tie vote. And my father said he locked eyes with Harry, and he cast that we should continue. That's an example. Harry was there at the beginning and was part of that first meeting. I started the foundation, Theodore Corbitt Institute, last year, and one of the missions is to it's my pivot away from this work. I've been working at this for over 14 years, and I'm looking to turn it over to a younger generation to carry it forward. But a lot of this is to get the history correct and preserve it right. We'll talk a little bit more as we go on. And one of the first big projects is a 4-part project where we're right now interviewing people that ran in the Bronx, on the Coons Dam Park, Sedgwick Avenue course. So it's a four-part oral history project. This is the mimeograph machine that was printed, the newsletter, quarterly newsletter. I referenced that I passed it out at races, and if a runner wasn't at one of the big races, then my mother would send it out to the membership. But this was on our dining room table, printing out the newsletter, entry forms, other collateral materials related to collateral to the sport. Just on my father. I like this term that Pam Jenkins came up, the father of modern marathon competition. The single biggest thing that he did was initiating a course measurement system that is in use today, and he pretty much single-handedly got it started. And being the father of ultramarathon running, Andy Milroy, historian, credits him with coining the term ultramarathons, and he participated in London Brighton 52-mile race 5 times between 1962 and 1969, and held various American records on the track. Recently found out, though, the 24-hour American record that we thought he set, there was another record in the 1880s. I haven't verified that yet, but I like the term father of ultramarathon. That's true, and the father of modern marathon competition. These are all the boxes of course measurement documents that are in storage, and he had a high capacity to get a lot of work done. And that's another side about my father. Him and Jackie Robinson were born the same day, less than 300 miles apart. They're buried in Cypress Hills, about 200 yards apart. Uh, there's a lot of similarities. Both spouses were nurses. Both suffered from chronic ankle injuries, and there's just a lot. But just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. Ted and Jackie separated at birth. The New York Pioneer Club, and co-founded by three black gentlemen in Harlem, integrated club during the Jim Crow era of segregation. It was a home for Jewish athletes. Mr. Joseph Yancey, co-founder and coach, preached that be gentlemen first, good citizens, and athletics secondary. For us, an inclusive culture welcoming athletes of all abilities. And he was Byron LaBeach, sprinter, called him the president of democracy. It's Joseph Yancey, New York Pioneer Club. And my first, significant thing regarding Harry is that it was Harry in 1947, this junior national 25K race. Well, let me read my father's words on it. I met Harry Murphy in 1947 when he was a member of the New York Pioneer Club. I ran in the Junior National 25-kilometer championship in Millburn, New Jersey. This was my first race after moving to Brooklyn from Ohio, and my first race beyond 10 kilometers. Harry beat me and then invited me to join the New York Pioneer Club. This is my father's words again. There was a birthday celebration for Harry in Prospect Park several years before he died. I attended and said to him, the only time you beat me running was the first and last time that we raced. He said, I know. Look at all what happened in between. The last time we raced was in Yonkers Marathon. I was at this Yonkers Marathon in 1978. It was suffering, but I remember Harry passing him in this race towards the end. And so first significant is that Harry invited my father to the New York Pioneer Club. And the only time that Harry beat my father was this race in 1947, and then this Yonkers Marathon in 1978. I referenced earlier to running for civil rights exhibit. New York Historic, they've dropped the society now. They're called the New York Historical. And I'm saying that this really is the first time that the true history of New York Roadrunners was told. Mr. Yancey and the inclusive culture of the Pioneer Club really has never been part of the history narrative until more recently. And this exhibit really highlighted that and disseminate that information widely. This article, The Forgotten Heroes of Running, I like because it says it all. Pam Jenkins, these two quotes that the modern marathon foot race is a gift to the world from the New York's Black community, and the story of the New York City Marathon until 1976 is Black history and should be taught as such. All of them set the blueprint. That's me at the McCombs Dam Park start. That pole is where the start line was. And this is the first Masters race in the United States. Again, the birth of New York Roadrunners was on this course, this Bronx Harlem River course, out and back, 4-mile loop, and it was a 5-mile loop also for the Cherry Tree Marathon. That's Yankee Stadium in the background, and that's Harry in the second row. He's walking towards the curb there. I was at this race in 1961. It was 3 races: a junior race, under 19, an open race, and then this race was for the gentleman over 45. So again, age group running, starting of age group running, and both Masters was started in New York, and also age group running with kids was expanded in New York. Here were the results from this race. Aldo Scanduro won, followed by Joe Kleinerman, Lou White. Harry was 5th in 27:27. This was a 4-mile race, and this, big field in the 1960s was 30 to 50 runners. Uh, this race, most of the runners were running under 6-minute pace. The last place finisher was Alan Steinfeld, who went on to be president of Road Runners Club. And his time was 26:45, and he was last place. This era, there were few runners, but and they all ran pretty fast. And there's another example, the Cherry Tree Marathon, 1965. The time limit was to be official finisher, you had to finish within 4 hours. And this is true in most of the marathons. The majority of runners were under 3.5 hours. In this case, over almost 60% were under 3 hours. And the entry fee was probably zero. I'm going to reference Charlie Robbins' scrapbook in talking about Harry next. But you should know Charlie Robbins was a champion runner for the Pioneer Club. He held 11 national championships. And my father felt he could have been the first runner to break 2:20. Jim Peters did it in 1953, but Charlie had the motor to do it, but he was a light trainer, and so he didn't exploit that potential he had. But this scrapbook is a tremendous reference and gives me insight about this what Charlie Robbins called Harry Murphy Day. This was the National Metropolitan AU Marathon Championships, typically held in Yonkers, but this year it was a celebration for the Queens, golden anniversary, something like that for Queens, and so it was held in Queens. Harry was first in the Met Championship, third in the National, and the Pioneer Club was second in the Met National Championship. It was a hot, humid day. Old Kelly won, 2:48. Charlie Robbins second, and Harry was third, and Harry beat Gerald Cote, the Canadian marathon champion and former Boston Marathon winner. So he labeled that Harry Murphy Day. And that's a picture of Harry during that race. And Virginia Cahill shared this tremendous trophy. This is the team members, Harry Murphy, Larry Lesser, and John Sterner. John Sterner was the co-founder of New York Road Runners. And, the challenge is to hold on to artifacts that are historic and before anything gets thrown away. And now with the foundation, I'm hoping to help historic figures find homes for these collections and these artifacts. And this is a tremendous example of something kept. Too many times things get thrown out, and families, when someone passes, they don't know what to do with all of that. And foundation, we're trying to create some best practices and help people along those lines. I love this picture. This was a 1957 Met Championship in Queens, South Ozone Park. Now, typically the race was in Yonkers, but for this year, the Met Championships was in Queens. And that's John Sterner, number 10, Harry, 11, and 36 is Clarence Ritchie. This is Harry with Nat Cyrilnik. Nat was the 4th president of New York Road Runners. And this is Harry with Ann Cyrilnik. And, back in the early 60s, women on the track could only run 800 meters or 880 yards. The AAU allowed women to run 1.25 miles, and then they raised it up to 1.5 miles in cross country. In 1963, Ann Cyrilnik organized women's races at cross-country races at Van Cortlandt Park for women. But it was a long road to from 1960, when the 800 meters was added to the Olympics, till we got to a point in the early 70s where women were allowed to run marathons and longer distance races. It's Harry in Yonkers. The track, I can't remember the name of the track, but I'm pretty sure this is a track in Yonkers. A lot of events were on this track. And then there was Met 15K championships were regularly held in Yonkers. This is an example, we have pictures, but we don't know the names of a lot of these people. This would have been probably in the late 40s, mid to late 40s, Van Cortlandt Park track. I believe that's Harry behind number 6. The Miller was running behind number 6. Now, next to Harry, that's Joe Kleineman, crouched down. Not who the next gentleman is, but that's Lou White, great Lou White, Pioneer Club. And but the other gentlemen, I'm not sure who they are. So it's so important that we label pictures and capture this while we when and when we can. I love this race that you do annually because this was one of the major formats of the sport back then. A lot of races were handicap races, and the New Yorkers traveled to races. Let me read a little more on Harry. Yeah, well, let's see. Harry had a car, and he was one of 3 or 4 runners who transported other runners to New England and the Mid-Atlantic states to compete in road races. And one of the reasons the formation of the Road Runners Club, the mission was to just have more races in the New York area, because that's New England was the hotbed for races, and that's where everybody traveled to see that happen. Let me also just the other significant point that I want to make regarding Harry that has gotten overlooked, and my father, being the person who came up with the 5-borough concept, has also been a struggle to get that properly told. I should have spoken up about it years ago, and I didn't, but I did by about 2021. But let me read you something about Harry's role with the 5-borough New York Marathon. George Spitz asked me for some ideas about a race to celebrate the bicentennial. I suggested a race through each of the 5 boroughs. New York Roadrunners adopted the race at the 1976 New York Marathon. I asked Harry to do a rough measurement from the toll gate in Staten Island to Columbus Circle and to the United Nations area by way of the Trowbridge Bridge. He did this measurement, found that in both the UN and Columbus Circle, you had close to a marathon. That gives you an idea of how helpful Harry Murphy was to the New York long-distance running scene. My father did all his letters in duplicate, and he didn't throw anything away. So I have the letter that he sent to Harry and I have Harry's response. And there was a lot of confusion back then about who came up with the 5-borough concept. And it was my father. George Spitz has gotten credit for that. Now George was very important for the race. It was ideal to come up with a big deal race for the bicentennial, but it was my father's idea to go to 5 boroughs, though he didn't think they'd get clearance to go over the Staten Island, go over the Mersey Island Bridge. He thought the race would have to go up in Jersey and come across the George Washington Bridge, which would have probably made an ultra marathon. But thanks to Percy Sutton and the green light to the 5-borough happened. But I've finally gotten some traction that my father was the one who came up with the 5-borough concept. I've never seen anything saying that Harry is the one that actually laid out the course, the first one to lay out the course. And maybe part of it's that people just don't know this, but I just wanted to add that to this presentation. But I love this because this was an important format for the sport. 2 examples were these tune-up races that the New Yorkers came up to New England for, leading up to Boston. But you'll notice each of these races were either too long, longer than advertised distance, or short. And I came across some wording that my father said that it was an embarrassment how bad, how off our courses were. And this is you can't verify records. You can't have a legitimate sport unless you can know that you're actually running the distance that's advertised. And so that's why my father says that this is the most important contribution to the sport, and it certainly is. The Hyde-Shoed race, this 1963 race that left to right, Pete McGartle, young Kelly, John J. Kelly, Bibi Bikila, Ethiopia's Mama Waldy. So these were the scratch runners for this high shoe race in 1963, and Bikila and Waldy ran Boston a couple of weeks later. Waldy won. I think Pete was fifth, Bikila was sixth, and Kelly was 10th. That's an example of a handicap race, a format that was very, very popular back then when the fields were small. Again, I'm referencing the foundation I've started. Um, it's my pivot away from this work because it's consumed me too much, and I'm proud of the things I've been able to do and help start both in general running history before 1970 and its first generation of New York Roadrunners Club, New York Roadrunners Club leaders. My work with African American running history, there were things I got consumed with this. Well, for example, this foundation, I should have started this probably 10 years ago at least. But I got consumed with other aspects of the history of the sport because so little had been done. So much had been missed. And so the goals are to grow the scholarship in the sport, build a team of running scholars, and that's happening. We've got people that are a lot younger than me that are interested in this mission and that are good storytellers, good writers, and find permanent homes for these running collections. I'm in conversation with the New York Historical about donating my father's collection to them. I want to keep it in New York, and we're having discussions along those lines, and hopefully that'll pan out. And again, just to create best practices to help families with both historic athletes and um, historic officials with running collections. Just help them along. This is a project that I initiated, and it's interviewing the early women pioneers of the sport. And also, it's the first time the early Black women pioneers of the sport have been interviewed in a systematic way. So please check out Starting Line 1928 when you can. Let's see. I think I've read everything. I've got one other thing I want to read, but yeah, our website is full of information, not only on my father, but just general running history of the sport. I like this quote from Nelson Mandela: "Running taught me the valuable lessons in cross-country competition. Training counted more than intrinsic ability, and I could compensate for a lack of natural aptitude with diligence and discipline. I applied this in everything I did." And Carter G. Woodson, the inventor of Negro History Week, had this quote. This in terms of just keeping history and as an inspiration. Charlie Robbins said this about Harry. I want to end with this. Now, Harry could run a 3-hour marathon in a foot of snow, blazing summer heat, rain, mud, or in perfect weather. He placed near, but not quite in the first 10 of the BAA on inclement days, but never had speed to place high in some races. He was liked and respected all up and down the East Coast, so everybody was happy for him, as it turned out. This was that Harry Murphy day that I referenced earlier. That's a quote from Charlie Robbins' scrapbook. So that's my presentation. We'll open the floor to some questions.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Sure.
Um, so, when Harry and Ted, were starting up New York Roadrunners, and, doing all these races, running was very much a niche sport. Do you think that they would be absolutely astounded by how now it's sort of like running is something that almost everybody does, and there's this, there's just been this incredible boom
Yeah,
in the popularity of running.
yeah, they had no idea it would grow like this. No idea. And yeah, my father, well, Harry got a chance to see some of it, and my father got a chance to see. He passed in 2007, so he saw it take off also, and Harry saw it too. But they had Bob Anderson, who started distance running news. It became Runner's World. Yeah, I think Tom Osler told him you're not going to get more than 1,000 people at best, or maybe even a less figure than that. They had no idea. No idea.
Yeah, just on that point, if I might, I remember Herring telling me when they first met Fred LeBeau, who showed up at one of the races in Central Park in his tennis whites, and he was quizzing them like, "What is this? What are you guys doing?" And then suddenly he was a runner, and then from there, it's all took off crazy. So it was interesting that they thought this Fred LeBeau was kind of an oddball. Like, are you going to turn this into a business? No, this is running. So it was very fun.
Yeah, well, and Fred gets a little too much credit. 1970, 71. I mean, he's considered a lot of times the race director in 1970. He was co-race director with Vince Chiappetta. Vince Chiappetta saw the potential, but he had to learn the sport, and Vince taught Fred the sport. Fred did a lot after that, but he gets a little too much credit in 1970. That's a misstatement. It's Vince Chiappetta who, after all these years, just was inducted into the New York Roadrunners Hall of Fame. Um, but it was Vince who taught Fred the ropes.
Tom?
Yeah, Ted, do you know why Harry left New York Roadrunners to form the Prospect Park Track Club in Brooklyn? That's my first question. I have another question.
Well, the Pioneer Club, Harry, I think raced for Melrose some too, and he might have raced for United AA, which is a club Jimmy Borden started in the 1960s. Distance runners, and I haven't gone public with this, but there was some discontent within the distance running of Pioneer Club and just not getting the attention.
But he helped establish New York Roadrunners and then went to the Prospect Park Track Club,
Well,
correct?
he was still in New York Roadrunners. He still was helping New York Roadrunners. So
I agree. Both he and Kurt, absolutely. I agree. But why did he establish a separate club in Prospect Park?
well, I've heard. Well, there was an opportunity for. There were a lot of clubs in New York, and he saw a need there. I've read that he was considered the mayor of Prospect Park, and certainly the heart and soul of Prospect Park Track Club. That reminds me of Joe Kleinman being the heart and soul of New York Roadrunners. I think he saw a need for the grow a club in Brooklyn. But
But there wasn't any difference that he felt that he needed to leave New York Roadrunners.
he never left. He never
Okay.
left New York Roadrunners.
Okay.
Yeah, he never left. He left the
Yeah.
Pioneer. He left the Pioneer Club. And that's what I was referencing.
Okay.
And Harry, is that correct? He ran for definitely Melrose, I believe, but I think he might have ran for United AA too. I don't know if anybody knows that, but
Yeah. Also, don't forget, Tom, that Bob Mueller and Jack Stetch were then running in Prospect Park. So this small little band of guys formed the Prospect Park Track Club. So, yeah, it was closer to home too, I think.
Okay. My second question is, you referenced the Cherry Tree Marathon, and I think a lot of people, we have a Cherry Tree 10-mile relay race coming up in a few weeks, and a lot of modern day runners don't understand the reference of why it's called the Cherry Tree. Could you explain that point of reference? I know what it is, but I'd like to hear it from you. Why it's
yeah,
the Cherry Tree.
this race was around both George Washington and Abe Lincoln's birthdays, and the reference of chopping down a cherry tree was how it got its name. Now, Dave Vogel said there was a cherry tree there at the start. I'm not sure if that was correct or not. And I'll ask Vince Giappetta that. I've never carried that forward. Dave Vogel lived to be 99. He was the oldest living Railroads Club original member. He just passed less than 2 years ago.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, and Gary, wasn't that race in McCombsdan Park?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And that was the first marathon put on by the newly formed New York Railroads Club in 1959. So it's a precursor to the New York Marathon. And well, I think it was 12 starters. My father won it. 4 finishers, something like that.
Thank you.
You know, the 4-hour time limit, they put a 4-hour time limit because they didn't want the officials to freeze the standing out there for so long. So it was, to be an official finisher, not only in New York, but a lot of places, you had to finish in 4 hours. And most did.
So Gary, when did you start becoming more active in terms of like, being a historian of, running and your father's legacy? Like obviously, you grew up with your father, but when did you start, making sure that everything was archived and, you kept that stories alive? Like, and obviously, from your intro, we know that you have this background in media research, and did that play a role in terms of your desire to keep everything documented and alive for the future generation?
Oh yeah, my background is fits right into what I've done in retirement. I retired in 2011, but I didn't really retire because I got started working on father's collection and to help the sport grow in terms of history. I started the Ted Corbitt Archives in the mid-1980s, but I didn't have time to really devote to it. I wish I had been more, could have done more. There was a gentleman who ran for the St. Anthony's Boys Club named Joe Kirby. Always had a camera, and he had probably 80+%, maybe 90% of the video of the runners of the 1960s in New York area, and got thrown away. The act of one person wiped out 80 to 90% of video history. And I was in touch with him. I wish I had made a stronger effort to get a hold of that video. But John Gallup said it got thrown away. And this is not isolated. This is common that collections got thrown out. Pioneer Club scrapbooks got thrown out, and that's why just moving forward, you can't let that happen. But yeah, I'm an information person, so it was natural for me to get wrapped up into history preservation and such. My father ran Yonkers 25 years, so but I think I read Harry did Yonkers Marathon over 40 times. Does that anybody know that for a fact? Yeah, I thought I saw that somewhere.
That number 42 in the picture, that was his 42nd and last Yonkers Marathon in 1984.
Nice. So that Prospect Park picture, that was the Yonkers?
Right.
Nice. Okay. What a run, 42 years. Yeah.
And basically finishing time in the 60s that he started with, about 4:11.
Yeah. Wow, he was consistent. My father was very consistent. Very consistent. My father's first Boston was 2:48 and some change. And his last Boston 20 plus years later was 249 and some change.
Could you also tell us a little bit about this, the other project that you have, which is your list of the fastest American-born Black marathoners, of team women marathoners in the United States?
Yeah, this is an example of Shawana White, a marathoner in the Carolinas, started asking a question: what Black women have qualified for the Olympic marathon trials? And nobody had an answer. And so I started to do some research and came up with what's now called a list. And we just 32 women that have been run under 3 hours. We just put out on social media. I'm going to send it out to the mailing list the next couple of days. An update with the list, and we've also started a men's list. Now this is American born. One day this needs to be done for naturalized citizens, but I couldn't take on the naturalized citizens and just didn't have the bandwidth to do that. But this is an example. Just there's been no research on an all-time list for Black women and Black men. So we've with the Institute, we've taken on that.
Tom?
I just wanted to thank you for, we're a club that when Harry started it, it was a handful of people, and it was still a handful of people, and maybe grew to 100 by 1980, and it has grown exponentially since then to almost 3,000 club members, and most of the membership has no idea who Harry Murphy was or what the origins of our club were, and how meek and humble and simple, but very heroic our start has been, and how it's grown. And so this has been a great contribution to enlightening our present membership as to our original roots and where we've come from, and looking and moving forward. And it's great that this is an opportunity that's been recorded. So I don't think we could thank you enough for what you've shared to all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those words. The history, the sport, so many elements of the sport were invented in New York. And it was done by this first generation of New York Roadrunner Club leaders. And Harry was right there. It was right there. It made it happen. I'm going to produce a timeline. It's done. I just got to sort of release it, put it on the website and issue it, but it'll be a definitive timeline of New York Roadrunner Club history. Again, these gentlemen and some women have been overlooked. I went to all the races. My father wasn't in a race. I was at races and helping out. So I saw this all. My first memory, Van Cortlandt Park, was the 1960 Olympic team working out there 2 days before they flew to Rome. That's my first memory of Van Cortlandt Park. My father worked out in Prospect Park. We lived in Brooklyn. And Fred Wilt, Olympian, also you would see Fred Wilt training in Prospect Park also. So that's just a little aside.
Edith?
This again. I appreciate this opportunity because there's not many people left that we're interviewing those that are,
Yeah.
and so we can get this history correct. But too many people have been overlooked. Far too many.
Mr. Corbitt, I'm Edith. First, thank you for a lot of things and for everything you're doing and you have done. I wonder if you could speak a bit about what was your father's experience as the only Black man or one of the few Black runners, in what was already a small group. And I ask for two reasons. One is because, I can relate personally, as my father was also the only Black man in many of the things he did, and it was not good. But also because 50 years later, here we are, and there aren't that many of us. I mean, we still notice, I certainly notice, when I go into races and I'm like, oh, here's the other Black person. So I wonder if you could speak to that and what was that like for your father. Thank you.
Yeah, I did a presentation in 2019. I was inducted in the National Black Marathon Association. I laid out all the discrimination ways and racist ways that my father, things he faced. I interviewed him a lot, and he didn't talk about these things. I had to. So when you're interviewing your elders and interviewing people, you got to also talk to the people around them that were close to them to get at all the stories. I've got it. There was a race, Poughkeepsie to Yonkers, 37-mile race that ran for 3 or 4 years in the mid-60s. And I have an interview where my father went up the day before. He was in good shape and wanted to get a good night's rest. Couldn't find accommodations in Poughkeepsie, New York. This is 1966, 67. He had to come home. And I remember this. He had to come home, and a runner drove him up the next morning. And I've got this on tape and saying, where can a Black person find a place to his teammate, Rod McNichol, and again, I had to get this from others. They were 1958 Boston Marathon. This was the marathon that he ran unofficially because 3 of the top runners were, you had to have a physical before you raced in those days. And they were disqualified because they didn't pass the physical. They were excited because they looked at the field and they knew each of them could have been in the top 3 that year. Well, the trip home, they were denied, the Connecticut Turnpike, denied eating in a restaurant. I've got this letter from 1938, a YMCA in Cincinnati. My father just finished high school, went to the University of Cincinnati, and it's invitation to him. These were people, invitation to high schools who did well scholastically and athletically, but it clearly said that this was for whites only, 1938. The Comrades Marathon, South Africa, would have been a perfect race for my father to compete in. He would have done it and had some more opportunities, but apartheid, that was not going to happen. And I think about what Arthur Ashe did to open up doors for sports and people to go there. And I often wondered if my father had some backings from the civil rights leaders. I wonder if he would have pushed the needle there. He wasn't going to do it on his own, but he might have if with some assistance and some backbone. But there's more. Those are some examples.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any more questions from anyone else in the club?
I have one.
Okay.
Thank you, Gary, for bringing back memories of your dad. Before we had the chip, I remember we used to have shoots. When did they start doing that at least at New York Road Runners?
You say it again. It used to, before chips.
They used to have shoots when you finished the race.
Yeah.
So everybody would be scored probably.
Yeah, I can remember that in cross country particularly, and I'm not sure exactly when. I can remember though going to see races in the 70s and seeing Harry and Kurt Steiner and Lou White doing scoring, Joe Kleineman.
I remember that.
Yeah, I could just see the picture and vision of those gentlemen, all the volunteer hours they put in. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly the years, but I know what you're talking about though. They're the shoots, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Holly?
Hi, thank you, Gary, for your presentation. I was just wondering if you have any thoughts about, what Prospect Park as a club or maybe any of us here as individuals could do to support, your oral history project or any of the ongoing efforts.
Yeah, I would ask you maybe send your contact information to Lillian, and she can I can get in touch with you. And anybody, if you want to, I have a running history preservation mailing list that some of you I know are on, and I'll start there in terms of adding you to that list, and um, yeah, I'm 73, and I'm looking for people a lot younger than I to carry this mission forward, and it's happening, thank goodness. So I welcome we welcome the help, and so yeah, I'm corbittg@comcast.net. That's my email, and so to Lillian and others, just please um, build a little database there of people. If you want to get my mailings, uh, and be glad to add you. Thanks. Yeah, the sport has done a poor job historically in preserving its history. So many athletes have passed before they were properly interviewed and recorded, and that's we can do better moving forward. You don't need to make those mistakes. So that's the charge with the foundation, and I'm stepping away. I can't put any more time to helping the sport. I got wrapped up into this work at the expense of finishing up work with my father's legacy, and one of the big projects, along with donating it, it's organized, the archive, and donating it to New York Historical, is doing a book of letters, because again, he did all his letters in duplicate, and he answered all his mail. So I can I'll publish those letters, and then they'll also be available for scholars, and that's a big part of my end game, is that scholars studying this sport years from now will have the history there for them to do scholarly books about the sport and about New York City running history. That's the end game here.
Gary, did your father have, did he do all of his letters in duplicate because he understood or knew that, everything that is happening now is, I'm a pioneer, this is going to be important for the future, or was it just he just liked to keep records of everything?
I think it's a combination. He did everything in a scholarly manner. And so he wanted reference. He wanted to have a reference to refer to. So I think it's a combination of things. That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, who does that?
Crystal?
I just had one question. When will you come to run a Harry's Handicap with us? The invitation is open, and we'll give you a really generous handicap.
January 1st every year, right?
Exactly. We'll be there. And the potluck is good too.
I bet it is. Yeah, that may be a tough date to get me there, but I'll keep that in mind. Again, I smile when I saw what you're doing, and I'd heard about it a few years back, but I don't know if I knew it was Harry's handicap and the origins. I'm sure he started it, and that's beautiful, beautiful tribute.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my favorite race of the year. So open invitation. Let us know if you're ever here on January 1st.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Any last minute questions from the club? Otherwise, I will bring this to a conclusion. Gary, thank you so much for telling us about your father's legacy, for telling us about Harry Murphy. This is very important for our own club's history, and I do know that, you know, one of the projects that we have here in the club is to document as much of our history as we can, because we are one of the oldest running clubs in New York City. This is something that we're really quite proud of, and you know, we're very honored that you came to share us the stories and help us with preserving our own legacy. Thank you so much.
What are you doing? Keep in touch, and just to Lillian, send your emails and your interests, and I'll be in touch over time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hoorah.
Have a good night, Gary.
Okay, take care.
Well done.
All right. Yeah, I don't know why, Janice, why did you make me like I feel very self-conscious.
Oh, the spotlight?
Yeah, I'm like the only person in the spotlight now. There's no reason for me
No.
to be this.
Oh, I can take you up right now. Yeah, you were spotlighted with Gary.
Anyway, yay, much better.